Hello everyone, Nick the DM here, and today we're going to take a look at the Rust Dragon, one of the Planar dragons from the 3.5 Draconomicon. And then I'm going to show you how I statted it out for 5th edition. Rust Dragons are native to the infernal battlefield of Acheron, or Acheron, however you want to pronounce it. I'm not going to judge you, Google told me it was Acheron. They are creatures of tarnished metal, embodying the forces of decay and destruction. Rust dragons bear a strong resemblance to the metallic dragons on the material plane, but look like they are covered in rust, tarnish, or verdigris. While some rust dragons may resemble copper and others brass, bronze, or silver, the abilities of each rust dragon remain the same. The scales of a rust dragon appear pitted and lined with corrosive colors, and the membranes of their wings are very thin and iridescent. Rust dragons who live on Acheron have an abundance of food in the endless iron cubes floating in the void of the plane. When drawn to the material plane, rust dragons will seek out veins of metal in underground caverns, making them loathed by many miners, and by association many dwarves as well. Rust dragons feed on corroded metal and can sustain on only that, but they enjoy fresh meat as a palate cleanser between ores, particularly that of vermin. Despite their destructive capabilities, the rust dragons aren't innately violent. They are simply hungry. Rust dragons attack with one goal in mind: food. They do not tolerate too much interference in pursuit of that goal and will readily break off from combat if a meal proves to be more trouble than it's worth. Now let's check out what I did to bring them over to 5th edition. I'll be going over the ancient rust dragon in the video, but I have a link to the wormling, young dragon, young adult, and ancient stat blocks in the description. Now let's check out the stats. Of course, I changed a few things, and I'll cover exactly what I changed, especially from 3.5 to 5th edition, but otherwise, let's get into it. Ancient Rust Dragon, Gargantuan Dragon, Lawful Evil / Lawful Neutral. Has an armor class of 21, has 332 hit points, or 19 d20 plus 133, and has movement speed on its feet of 40, burrow speed of 45, and a fly speed of 80. So it can burrow quite easily, especially when looking for ores and such. For its skills, or for its ability scores, it has a 27 strength, 10 dexterity, 25 constitution, 12 intelligence, 17 wisdom, and 14 charisma. So no negatives in the mental stats, but they're still fairly low, considering most other ancient dragons have quite high mental stats, and fairly okay for physical stats. Saving throws, it has proficiency in dexterity, constitution, and wisdom saves. It has expertise in perception and proficiency in stealth. It has 1 damage resistance, but it covers a lot of options. And it is resistant to weapons made from metal, regardless of if they're magical or not. This means that any magic weapon that hits it will only deal half damage, and also means that finally Shillelagh is more versatile than it once was, which it already was, having a d8 damage plus spellcasting modifier, but now using a wooden staff, you can actually deal damage to a rust dragon without having to overcome its resistance somehow. For senses, it has blind sight of 60 feet, dark vision of 120, and a passive perception of 25. Because of its bestial nature, rust dragons aren't known to speak any languages. Of course, this might be up to DM interpretation if one is particularly smarter, but generally speaking, according to the 3.5 Draconomicon, it is not listed that they know any languages whatsoever. Ancient category has a challenge rating of 19. Moving on to these abilities. It has legendary resistance 3 times per day. If the dragon fails a saving throw, it can choose to succeed instead. Magic weapons. The dragon's weapon attacks are magical, and then its rusting scales feature. Any non-magical weapon made of metal that hits the rust dragon corrodes. After dealing damage, the weapon takes a permanent and cumulative -1 to its damage rolls. If the penalty drops to -5, the weapon is destroyed. Non-magical ammunition made of metal that hits the rust dragon is destroyed after dealing damage. Now, that is something that covers from all the way from wormling to adult to ancient rust dragons. However, in the earlier editions, in 3.5, they only got the rusting scales feature at worm level, so like the second oldest dragon category. And the reason for that was in earlier editions, if any weapon made of metal that had a less than a +5 enchantment on it struck the worm rust dragon, or the rust worm, I guess, it had to make a dexterity saving throw or be destroyed instantaneously. Now, I changed that a little bit because that was, again, a lot of earlier editions had more like save or die type features, as that one was. So what I've changed here is, of course, Wormling to Adult has the normal rusting scales feature, quite like that of the Rust monster from 5th edition. But for the Ancient category, it has a specific add-on to it, which is when a magical weapon or piece of ammunition made of metal hits the dragon, roll a d20. On a roll of 11 or higher, the weapon is unaffected by the rusting scales. On a roll of 10 or lower, the weapon is subject to the -1 penalty as if it was a non-magical weapon. Artifacts, of course, are immune to this effect. So this means any magical weapon would still, that hits an Ancient Rust Dragon specifically, or older age categories if you feel like making some of those, it can be subject to the rusting scales feature, but it has a 50-50 chance of not being subjected to it. And of course it does have that buffer because the -1 penalty to damage rolls, it will of course have to go through the +1, +2, or +3 enchantment on the weapon first. So it's a lot harder for it to get destroyed, and it's fairly simple, especially if they're encountering this at higher levels, to repair a magic item, as long as you have contact with people and depending on your campaign. Though if it's destroyed outright, it's hard to remake it. Now moving on to its actions. The Rust Dragon has a multi-attack in which it can use its Frightful Presence and then makes 3 attacks, 1 with its Rusting Bite and 2 with its Claws. For its Rusting Bite, it has a +14 to hit, reach of 15 feet, hits 1 target, deals 2d10 plus 8 piercing damage for an average of 19. The Rust Dragon's Bite corrodes non-magical metal it strikes. If a target hit by this is made of metal and isn't being worn or carried, the bite destroys a 1-foot cube of it. If the target is a creature wearing metal armor or wielding a metal shield, the armor or shield takes a permanent and cumulative -1 to the AC it offers. Armor reduced to an AC of 10 or shield that drops to a +0 bonus is destroyed. If the target is both wielding a metal shield and wearing metal armor, the rusting corrodes the shield first, as it would commonly be that they would block with their shield before getting hit in the armor. For its claw attack, it's a +14 to hit, reach of 10 feet. It hits for 2d6 plus 8 slashing damage, or an average of 15. Its tail attack is a +14 to hit, reach of 20 feet, hits for 2d8 plus 8 bludgeoning damage, and for an average of 17. Frightful Presence is a range of 120, but has a very low save DC at 16. So it's not very easy to be frightened of these things, but they still have that innate capability of being frightening. Breath weapons, it has 2, as most planar dragons and metallic dragons do. It has its Acid Breath, which is a 90-foot line that is 5 feet wide. Each creature must make a DC 21 dexterity saving throw or take 13d8, or an average of 59 acid damage on a failed save, half as much on a successful one. The breath weapons recharge on a 5 to 6, forgot to mention that. Then it's Corrosive Breath. Now this one I made, and I'm kind of rethinking it, so I'll explain why I'm rethinking it. The dragon exhales a reddish-brown liquid in a 90-foot cone. The breath corrodes any non-magical metal in its area. If an object in the area isn't being worn or carried, the breath destroys a 1-foot cube of it. Each creature in the area must succeed on a DC 21 dexterity saving throw to avoid the effects of the corrosive breath on a success. On a failure, any object in the area that is either metal armor or a metal shield being worn or carried takes a permanent and cumulative -1 penalty to the AC it offers. Armor reduced to an AC of 10 or shield that drops to a +0 bonus is destroyed, quite like that of the Rusting Bite feature. And if the object in the area is a held metal weapon, it rusts as described in the Rusting Scales trait. So, here's my thought process on this. Metal armor and shields that are enchanted magically are enchanted for the purposes of being protective. They have protective magics on it. A weapon has more offensive magic on it, which is why magical weapons still have a chance of being affected by the corrosive breath as it does in the Rusting Scales, but magical armor would be unaffected. That is my thought process for that. And of course, because the Rusting Scales changes as they hit Ancient category, this only affects non-magical weapons all the way up until it hits Ancient category. So if you encounter a young, adult, or wormling Rust Dragon, they will only have it'll only affect non-magical weapons and armor. So that's my thought process on that. Feel free to change that however you want. I just kept it to this, and of course, earlier editions, it was just destroy everything in sight. So I just kind of balanced it. Legendary actions, with most dragons, it has 3. It has its detect, where it can make a perception check. It has its tail attack, which it can make a tail attack, which I described earlier. And then it has its wing attack, which the dragon beats its wings. Each creature within 10 foot of the dragon must succeed on a DC 20 dexterity or 22 dexterity saving throw, or take 15 or 2d6 plus 8 bludgeoning damage and be knocked prone. The dragon can then fly up to half its flying speed. This is especially great, especially in Acheron, where the floating cubes in terrain can make it so it flying away can be just a straight-up escape. Or if a party member is knocked prone, they have a potential of maybe being on the edge of one of these cubes and sliding. One thing I should mention is that for its skills and abilities, so not its actions, in earlier editions, like most planar dragons, and honestly just every dragon, it had innate spellcasting. And it still can. You can use the monster manual from 5th edition's Dragon Innate Spellcasting feature to look through and give this spells based on that. But the reason I didn't give it some explicitly here is because a lot of the spells it had in 3.5 have not been translated over to 5th edition. And the one that was close was Wall of Iron, which was basically Wall of Stone with a higher AC and more hit points. Now, of course, you can do that yourself. You can bring that in to the dragon if you feel like using that. That's fairly simple to do. I just didn't want to do it. I wanted to mention, though, that I didn't forget it. I just purposely left it out because it had like 6 spells, or maybe 4 spells total, and only one of them had any resemblance to a 5th edition spell. Because normally, if I can find a spell that's very close to resembling an old spell, I'll just substitute it, as I do with some of the dragons. But other ones that I just can't find a substitution for, I just leave out. In this case, I couldn't really find any suitable substitutions. Anyways, that's all I have for the Rust Dragon. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoy the dragons, and if you like this video, leave it a like, and subscribe for more videos like this. I have a lot on my channel currently. I have a lot more planned, especially a surprise coming up in March. So I'll keep you all posted, and again, thank you all so much for watching. I hope to see you next time. Alright, bye!